Hello and welcome to the virtual Rock Ed Camp session of Making Behaviors as Easy as ABC. My name is Catherine Miller, and I will be with you during the session to talk about all things behavior, as well as using the ABC process for data collection. So, to get into a little about me, I graduated from Indiana University of Pennsylvania in 2016 with a degree in early childhood education and special education. I am going to be graduating from Slippery Rock University in December of 2020 with my master's in special education with applied behavioral analysis. And I have been teaching at Slippery Rock Area School District since 2016. I've been in the elementary setting in a special education classroom. So let's get into what this session is all about today. We are going to be identifying the terminology of what A, B, C means. That stands for antecedent, behavior, and consequence. We are also going to establish strategies to use prior to the behavior, during the behavior, and after the behavior. We're also going to discuss the benefits of ABC data collection, as well as the process and how to take ABC data. This is something that you may know about, but maybe you're not sure about how the whole process looks or what you should be looking for. So the goals for this session, I really want us to become more comfortable dealing with challenging behaviors. Whether you're a preschool teacher, an elementary teacher, middle school, a high school, or you teach college students, or maybe you work with adults, you're going to see behaviors. And most of those behaviors are the behaviors we want to see, but sometimes there are those challenging behaviors that maybe we're just not comfortable or confident in dealing with. So this session is all about becoming more comfortable and more confident in dealing with those challenging behaviors. We're going to work on identifying the process of taking or collecting ABC data, as well as adding some strategies to your teacher toolbox. These may be things that you are aware of, things that you do, and that just might be reinforcing or reiterating to you that what you are using is successful, or you might find something new today, and that is my hope. So, what is ABC? This is the framework of the whole session. This is what we're really focused on. The A stands for antecedent, and that is what happens prior to the behavior of concern. The B stands for behavior, and that is what the behavior of concern really is. And we're going to go into more detail what all of these are. And then the C stands for consequences, and that is what happens right after the behavior. So let's get into those a little bit more. So to talk about some examples of it, so ABC is an acronym that we use that stands for the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence, and it's type of data collection that really shows us why a behavior is happening. So to show some examples, the antecedent, the teacher asks a question. What's going to be the behavior? Well, the student raises their hand. And what happens after that? Well, the teacher calls on the student. So in this example, the consequence of the teacher calling on the student because the student raised their hand, the consequence was the teacher calls on the student. That's going to reinforce for that student, I need to raise my hand in order to get the teacher's attention or in order to get a reward of answering the question. Let's see another example. The teacher provides a task box. The student throws himself on the ground, is the behavior. And the consequence is the student does not receive the reward. So that's what happens right after the behavior. Now, it's important to note that consequences do not always have to be negative or punishing. Sometimes it's just whatever you have to use to reinforce the appropriate behavior to happen or decrease the inappropriate behavior. So it does not always have to be a negative consequence. So the million-dollar question that we have today is, will I be wasting my time? And I know that as a special education teacher, you have data to take for IEPs. You have data to take for progress monitoring. You have data to take for weekly progression or monthly progression. So the question is, will you be wasting your time with this data? The answer is, depends on what you do with the data. If you take data for days and hours and minutes and you put it in a folder, and you pull it out at a meeting, and that is the first time you look at it since taking the data. then yes, I would say you would be wasting your time. If you take the time to analyze the data and try to find the pattern, that is going to help you with your intervention plan because you are going to see the behavior occurs because of this certain antecedent, what's happening right before the behavior. Or maybe this behavior occurs because of the consequence, something you did right after the behavior. If you analyze the data, you may find settings or environments that the student does not do very well in, and you can provide interventions at that time to support the student. So the important part of this is no, you will not waste your time if you take the time to analyze the data because it will make the intervention plan much easier to follow. The ABC data is kind of like the baseline data in a way. It shows you where the student starts, and then we can continue the data once we throw in some interventions to see if it's really beneficial for the student. So let's break this down into the A, the B, and the C. The A stands for antecedents, and this is when you're going to ask yourself, what occurred prior to the behavior? Was it a setting? Was it an environment? Was it something that someone said? Maybe it's a certain person. What happened right before that behavior? Some examples of that would be the teacher gives task that is not preferred. A teacher gives a task that's not preferred, like a writing activity, and the student shows the behavior of running from the classroom. We know that maybe our intervention plan needs to focus on those non-preferred tasks in order for the behavior not to happen or to change the behavior. Another example would be the timer goes off to clean up. The student may be using their favorite reward. They love the Play-Doh. They love the smell of it. They love the feel of it, but that timer goes off. It's time to clean up. Now we know that we may have to throw some interventions into place when they're using a preferred item. Maybe some visuals that show that time is up or time is getting close to being up so that hopefully decreases the behavior from happening or decreases the magnitude of the behavior. The last one I have is times of transition. If you know that it's a transition and that's when you see the behavior, you may throw something into an intervention plan about transitions to show that that is where the difficulty is happening. That's where we see the behaviors occurring. It's important to remember that ABC data kind of helps us with why the behavior is occurring. Everything that we see with the antecedents, the behavior, and the consequences kind of shapes the story of why that behavior may be occurring. Now let's talk about the behaviors. When you have behaviors, you want to ask yourself, what is the student doing? What can you see? What can you hear happening? Some examples would be running from the classroom. You can see the student running from the classroom or maybe running from the table. You can see a student raising their hand, and you can see students throwing items. Now, I will say that when you're talking about behaviors, it is very important for you to be as specific as possible. For this example here about throwing items, that could be a little bit more specific. Are they throwing items that are desks and chairs? Are they throwing items like papers or a pillow? What are they actually throwing? That's going to tell us a lot of information, especially when it comes to making an intervention plan for that student. Also, you might say, are they throwing the items at somebody or not at somebody? So I would even say this throwing items could change and be specific or defined a little bit more. Some non-examples would be non-compliant, tantrum, and attention seeking. Now, these are words that I use, you may use, and I'm not saying that these are bad words to use. I'm just saying that this shows non-compliant if I was taking data and a staff member was taking data or another person on the IEP team, their definition of non-compliant may look different than my definition of non-compliant. So this is where you would say non-compliant is throwing themselves on the floor and refusing to do the work. Something along those lines. You want to be specific on what they're doing for the behavior. Tantrum is another example. Tantrum would be different for me than you. Maybe the tantrum of a 3-year-old is different than the tantrum of an adult. So that is another one where you want to be specific and what does this tantrum look like? especially if you have behaviors happening at different times of the day. Maybe their non-compliant behaviors in the morning look different than their tantrums in the afternoon. So you want to look at using specific language with the behavior so that if you have a staff member working or you just go back to analyze the data, you can see what that means, non-compliant or tantrum or attention seeking. And lastly, the C is for consequence. And you're going to ask yourself, what occurred right after the behavior? Was the student given a reward? Was the student given a directive? What happens right after the behavior also can tell us why the behavior occurs, because if it increases the inappropriate behavior, then you know what type of consequence you want to use in the intervention plan. If it decreases the inappropriate behavior, that is also something to note onto why the behavior may be occurring or what's going to be best for your intervention plan. It's important to note, though, that consequences can be planned, like giving a reward or giving a directive, or they could be unplanned. Maybe you decide to say stop, and that creates a new behavior, something that maybe was not planned for you, or maybe that's something that the student does that isn't planned. So remember that sometimes the consequences may be planned or unplanned, and that's something to look forward to. All right, now let's talk about the ABC data collection process. We want to talk about why would we take this data. We also want to talk about some specific areas that we want to make sure are succinct, like the accessibility to the collection forms, as well as how we collect our data. So the first question is why? Well, ABC data helps us identify why a behavior is happening. It can help us with our intervention plans by saying these antecedents occur for these behaviors, and these consequences help increase or decrease the behavior. So the why is important because it helps us form the strategies and the intervention plans that we want to use. Accessibility. This is a big one. You want to make sure that your data collection sheets are accessible to whoever is taking the data. For example, if you are sitting with a student at a table, but the data sheet is on your desk, that's a problem because it's going to be hard to remember what occurred. So you want that data sheet right there with you. For example, one time I was working with a student and my data sheet was on my desk. And so I asked one of the staff members, could you please get the data clipboard and bring it over? That actually increased a new behavior with the student because now my attention was on somebody else. And so then I was thinking, I created a whole new situation here that I need to take more data on, where if I would just have that data sheet on my lap, it would not have created that attention seeking behavior. Another thing about data collection is you may be saying, Kate, I don't have time to take data all day long and teach all day long to multiple students, to multiple grades. I don't have time for it. Data collection does not need to occur all day long. If you know that transitions seem to be the biggest area of concern, then that is maybe where you'll just collect your data during transitions. If it's at first and you're not sure where the behaviors are occurring or they're sporadic or random during the day, then maybe you take the first week and do data collection all day. But it doesn't always have to be the same person. Create a time or create a schedule for which staff member will be taking the data at what time. I may be working with students where another staff member may be working on collecting the data for a certain student or vice versa. So really work on the scheduling of who may be taking the data as well as the time of day. It does not have to be all day, but it can be. That is up to you in your judgment and what you believe is going to give you the best information in creating a behavior plan that will change the behavior. So I have some behavior ABC data collection sheets that I have created in the past. This first one here that is in this pink colored box, I kept as notes where I would put the student name, I would have the date, time, activity, the antecedents, the behaviors, the consequences, and the notes. I wasn't really sure what I was looking for, but I knew what an antecedent was, what a behavior was, and what a consequence was. So I just wrote down notes. And then I found using this form, it took a lot of my time. And when I would go back to analyze the data, it would take me a lot of time to look at what I wrote and look at some of the acronyms I used or some of the abbreviations that I used. And I was very confused. And it just took a lot of time. Now, if you're someone that likes to take notes this way, this might be a great data sheet for you. But I created this one based on what I found was difficult for me and difficult for my analyzation of the data with the learners that I had. So I created this one where I had some information. I had the antecedent, the behavior, the consequences, and the notes. And I had it in a checklist form. So I would put the date, the start time, the activity. I would have given directive, transition, independent task, interaction, or other, and I would just put a check mark. Behavior, same thing, yelling or screaming, eloped, physical or verbal aggression, and I would circle which one it was. Left classroom, biting or spitting, refusal, and then the same thing with the consequences. And if I had something like removed student or class, I would circle which one I did. If you find yourself always using a check mark, an X, or whatever you use on other and having to write out the antecedent, the behavior, or the consequence, this is editable that you can change based on your student. If you know you're always seeing other and you're always having to write it, just go back and add that to one of the antecedents on the list so that it is easier for you. And then this was an easier way to analyze because I would throw this information into a Google form and I would have my graphs. Or I could say, okay, I know that most days it's because of transition. It was just much easier to analyze and look at in a checklist form for me. And that's what I utilized. But once again, that is up to you, whatever is more comfortable for you. I created these based on what was easiest for me. There's other ABC data collection sheets out there or something that may work better for you. So I want to go over just the process and how I fill out my ABC data sheet, just so you know. So the first thing I do is put the date, and obviously this is a date in the future. The next thing I do is add my start and end time. It started at 8:30 a.m. and ended at 8:37. In the activity, I wrote bus to school. Maybe it happened for you during ELA or math or specials, but this one specifically happened right at the beginning of the day where the student was coming from the bus to the school. That would be a transition, so I would put an X on transition. The behavior that I saw was aggression. Now, which one was it? I would circle physical aggression. I also was seeing refusal. If you have multiple behaviors, obviously you want to look at the physical or verbal aggression first over refusal. They can say no all day, but as soon as they get physical with themselves or with others, that's something that you want to stop immediately. So that's the one that I would be focusing on, would be the physical aggression. And the consequence, I provided the student options. So instead of saying, no, don't hit me, and creating a behavior spiral again, I provided them options. And so I used the notes section to say the option was, I said to them, would you like to speed walk race to the classroom or to breakfast? And that immediately took the student from, okay, I know I have to get here and do schoolwork, to, all right, let's play a game. Let's see how that goes. So I wrote the options. If the option did not work for the student, maybe I'd put an X over here just to show that it did not work. Or if it did work for the student, maybe I'd put a check mark to show that it did work. So that whenever I go to analyze my data, I can say this option did not work for this situation, or this option did work. Some other things that you may want to add is on the physical aggression, you might want to make a little note saying who the physical aggression was with. Is it a specific staff member? Was it with a peer? Or the refusal, you might want to say, was the refusal swearing or was it just saying no? I also like to print these out and make them double-sided and put them on a clipboard or a binder or a folder. And what I found for the clipboards is just to put a blank sheet on the top that says confidential. Does not have a student name, but it has some staff members that can access it just in case there's more people taking data. Same thing with a folder. You don't want to just leave these laying around because there is information. It might have a student name or it might have information related to a student that you don't maybe want other people to see. So just make sure that it's confidential, but also accessible at the same time. So now we're going to talk about reinforcement. And I kind of spoke on this with the consequences. Reinforcement is something that comes after a behavior that increases the chances of that behavior occurring again. So reinforcement happens after a behavior, and we're hoping that what we use will increase that behavior or changing that behavior from happening again. Reinforcement is not bribery. I hear many people say, I'm not going to give a point or a star or a smiley face for something that students should be doing every day anyways. And this is where the reinforcement versus bribery conversation can happen. Reinforcement comes after the behavior in hopes to increase the chance of that behavior happening again. Bribery comes before the behavior in hopes that the reward will assist the learner in having the behavior occur. So let me give you an example, and I actually heard this example through the Autism Helper, and that is she has blogs and she talks about all things special ed that are helpful. So she provided this great example that I thought was really, really great. Pretend you're going to the store with your toddler and you're saying, I just need to get in and out. I need to get a few things for dinner and I don't want anything to happen. Bribery would be, here's a lollipop. You give the lollipop to your toddler and you say, here you go, hoping that this will create behaviors that are appropriate for the setting. And just say, this lollipop I want you to have, and I know you're going to be great. Now, reinforcement would say, sit with your toddler and say, listen, these are the behaviors I want to see. If I see these behaviors, you get the lollipop. And I think that's really great to see the difference between reinforcement and bribery, because I also hear people say reinforcement is bribery, and it's really not, because reinforcement comes after the behavior, bribery comes before. Bribery does work, but it's a slippery slope to climb because it just is setting you up for the behavior change to not occur. Reinforcement can be difficult. It can be tricky because it may be something that you're not even thinking of that is reinforcing to the student. It may be something that is very random, and it may change throughout the day or throughout the weeks or the months. Reinforcement can be difficult because it may be hard to find out what is reinforcing for the student. Provide the student a survey, or the parents or other teachers that work with that student. Provide them with a survey that shares information of things that have worked in the past. Or maybe you need to provide them with a preference assessment that shows them two objects and they have to pick which one is more rewarding for them. And the reinforcements just might be something very odd. I had a student once that liked to be a doctor. He pretended he was a doctor and he wanted us to call him Dr. John. So we would say, okay, if you do these tasks, we will set the timer for 10 minutes where you get to play doctor. And so in that 10 minutes, we would say, Dr. John, it's nice to see you. Can you tell us about your day? And he would talk about all the things that he does at the office. And that was what was reinforcing to him. So it wasn't using an iPad. It wasn't a token economy system. It wasn't praise. It wasn't visuals. It was just the opportunity to act like it. Reinforcement can be anything that increases the chance of the appropriate behavior happening again. So now we have come to the middle of our session, and this is the session code that you will need for your documentation. So my session, Making Behaviors as Easy as ABC, is KMM09. KMM09. I'll give you time to write that down or take a picture of it with your phone. All right, so now that we have talked about data collection and we talked about what ABC stands for, I kind of want to shift gears here and move into some strategies that maybe you utilize in your classroom or some strategies that you might want to incorporate. So let's first talk about strategies to utilize prior to the behavior. So this would be things that would happen before the behavior. How can you set the student up for success? And a way to set the student up for success is just by setting rules and expectations, making those clear for the student. It may be visually, or it might be just something that they have to hear. For example, let's say the the world changes here and you have to walk in the store and yell, "Hey, I'm here," instead of just walking in quietly and beginning your shopping. You would have an inappropriate behavior by walking in quietly because the new role or the new expectation is you let everybody know that you were there. So you were not aware of the rules or expectations of shopping, and you actually had an inappropriate behavior. So sometimes you may think that a student knows what the expectations are when really they don't. And sometimes they need those reminders many times throughout the day or just every day. So making sure we set our students up for success by setting clear roles and expectations. And I also love visuals, visuals, visuals. And I'm going to go through some of those visuals with you right now. The first one I have up here in the top left corner is the first then. I use these picture cards, and I have seen people use actual pictures. So you may throw task boxes that are in your classroom, an actual picture of that, and then the reward, an actual picture of the reward. If you have an advanced learner, you might choose boxes that say first, and then a second box that says next, and then the last box that says then. First, task boxes. Next, clean up, then reward. This just shares with the learner what your expectations are and what they need to do. I really, really like this. And I will show you where I got all of these materials at the very end. Another thing I like here in the top right corner is I am working for. These are our token economy boards. The students choose what reward they would like to be working for. And then some have to earn stars, some like to earn thumbs up, some like to earn smiley faces, whatever works for you and your learner. And once again, it can change based on the student. So this student had to earn 10 stars. This student had to earn 4 thumbs up. It's based on the learner. It's based on how many tasks you may have during the day. This is very, very beneficial. Another thing is this puzzle piece, and I created this for one of my students, and I really like the puzzle piece because it's something different. It's something that the students really understand. One of my students really liked to play the game Clay Jam on an iPad. So what I had this student do was they had to earn pieces of the puzzle. So I cut a picture of the Clay Jam out with the puzzle template, and they had to get 4 parts and they had to put it together. Once all 4 of those parts were together, they earned the reward. Down here in the bottom left corner, I have a visual schedule, and visual schedules help students that have trouble with transitions, but it also just helps students see what their schedule is going to look like. I like to put my visual schedules in a binder so that the student can just carry that with them to specials or carry that with them to a different classroom for math or reading. And I just put Velcro, and then I have these pieces. I have the afternoon side on the flip side of the AM schedule. And then after that, I have one of the pencil pockets that go into binders, and that's where all the visuals are. And the students really, by the end of the year, like to be able to clean up their schedule and put new pieces out for their schedule. And lastly, down here in the bottom right-hand corner, I have a behavior contingency map. If you're not familiar with these, the green obviously means the good behavior, what we're looking for, and the red is the not so good behavior, what Miss Miller does not want to see. So this is actually one that I typed out because I utilized it during virtual learning at the end of the school year. If this is something that you are reviewing every day, you might want to type it out and just throw it in their binder. But this one would be, I am working with my teacher. What we want to see is I can sit in my seat, I can ask for a break, and I earn Play-Doh. So if I can sit in my seat and ask for a break if I need it, I get to earn Play-Doh. If you run from the table, if you don't ask for a break, you do not earn Play-Doh. My learner was learning how to read, was pretty good at reading, and we were practicing that skill. So I typed it out, but you may also use these visuals here. You might throw a visual in so that they can see the visual pictures. It depends on your learner. It depends on what you want to do. I also have another form that I leave the boxes blank and I laminate it so that if I need to during a class period or during the school day, I can get a dry erase marker and just write it out or draw pictures for them or have them draw the pictures. So that is another strategy you can use. Now we are going to talk about strategies to utilize during the behaviors. So we want to be as proactive as possible, using the visuals, setting the clear expectations, knowing that they're going to earn reward. We want to stay as proactive as possible, but sometimes the behaviors still happen. So what can we do during behavior to help our students? And so some of those things would be visuals, providing a break, wait it out, provide options, or planned ignoring. Some visuals that I like to use is I have a green, a yellow, and a red card, and I show them that, and I work with my students so that they know what those mean. Green means you're making a good decision. Yellow means, it's a little questionable. Let's either make a different decision. And then red would mean this is not the best decision and you need to change it immediately. Now, these are things that I have to teach with my students because these would be their replacement behaviors. These would be their strategies or interventions that they like to utilize for during behavior so that we're not seeing the inappropriate behaviors. It's also important that you think about the function of the behavior. If you have a student who likes to escape their work, then providing a break is not the best option because now they learned that when you see, whenever they want a break, all they need to do is throw a fit or they get to yell and then they get the break. So you need to think about the function of their behavior to show that maybe providing a break isn't the best option. Planned ignoring is a very effective method for some behaviors. Obviously, if it's a safety concern or a dangerous behavior, planned ignoring is not the best because you're ignoring what they're doing. And if it's a safety concern, that's something you need to address immediately. Planned ignoring, one of the main things I want you to get away from that is that you're not ignoring the student. You're ignoring their behavior, their inappropriate behavior. But you need to be quick on your feet with planned ignoring because if they're screaming, that's their behavior. As soon as they stop, you need to reward it immediately so that they know, oh, I stopped screaming and now I get my break. So that they learn no screaming equals break. And that's just a few things about what you can utilize during behavior. Some of the things, and this is what I was talking about with some of my cards. If you look here, I have these break cards, and these are really great for my learners that are out in the general education setting, either for specials, lunch, recess, maybe for math. And I teach my students about the zones of regulation. So each color means a different feeling. So green means you're feeling good, you're ready to go, but here are some choices if you just need to get back to the green zone. Red means that you're angry, you're yelling. This is where you might see some of your behaviors. Here are some choices that you can use. Yellow, you're getting there, you're just a little frustrated, you're feeling silly. These are some of the options you can use for that. And my blue card, which is I'm sick, I'm bored, I'm sad, and then there are some options. And I teach my learners how to use these cards so that they can show their teacher, and the teachers also learn how to use the cards so that they know that maybe that student needs to go get a drink of water. Maybe that student needs to go sit in the back of the classroom for a few minutes. And this does not mean that they get a break card and they get to come to a different classroom, like the special education classroom. Sometimes they just need to go get a drink of water or take a quick walk. And this helps my learners kind of self-regulate. If this is something new that I'm teaching my learners, then I obviously want to take the time for them to get more comfortable with it. And if it's something new, then I obviously have a staff member there to help them through it. I also use break cards here, and you can see this one says 5 minutes or 2 minutes, or it has no minutes. And what I do is I will lay these out in front of the student, and if I'm working with them, instead of them escaping from the work area or leaving the classroom, they can point to the break card, and then they know that they can go take a break. At first, I provide them with a lot of break cards so that they're practicing the skill of asking for a break before leaving. And then eventually you want to limit the amount of cards you're using or the amount of time. But at first, anytime they ask for a break, I let them take a break so that they can get used to the fact that I need to ask for a break instead of running from the classroom. I think it's more important that they start practicing asking for breaks instead of maybe the academics at the time, because running from the classroom is also taking away from the academics. And then these are the cards that I was talking about that I utilize during behaviors. The green means great job. Yellow means you might want to work on it. And red means stop now. And most times whenever I hold these up for students, I don't use my words because sometimes my words will set them off. So sometimes I just hold it. And once again, these are things that my students know about me, and they know about the process so that they don't have to ask questions. What does that mean? They know if I hold green up, you're making great choices. So these are things that we practice um, with behavior so that they know what it means whenever I utilize them. So some things you can utilize after behavior. These are going to be your reinforcers, a token economy system, using stars, class dojo points, cutting up pieces of a puzzle, maybe adding pieces to an object, like you need to add scoops of ice cream, and when you get to a certain amount, you get your reward. Utilizing technology as a reward. Kids love technology. If that's what you need to use after a behavior, that's great. Give them a break if they just need a break, or you can reward them however they need it. For one of my students, he really enjoyed adult attention. So whoever the adult that was working with him would put their chair at the very end of the table, and then anytime we had the appropriate behavior, the adult would just move their chair closer so that by the end, the adult was sitting right next to the student, and that's what they were working for. Some other reinforcer ideas that I have are if you are working with a whole group, you can use paper clips, and you might want the paper clips to go the whole length of the classroom or the whole length of the wall, or maybe they only need to get 10 paper clips. And once they have appropriate behavior, a student puts a paper clip on, and once they get all of that, they get a class reward. Another example could be using a calendar, and the kids would pull out of the envelope a date like the 1st or the 20th or the 18th, and they would put that on the calendar. And when the whole calendar was filled out, they would then get the class reward that maybe you provide as an option, or maybe you just tell them what it is. Another one that works well is earning money. And this would not be real money, obviously, but maybe like Miller money or a cute name that you have. And if they earn money every week or every month, they get to use their money to buy something. Maybe they buy pencils or erasers. Or maybe if they earn money and they save their money, if they have $20, they get to change their seat for a day. So you can have things that are not tangible, maybe things that are just reinforcing, or you get to sit next to the teacher. Anything that would be reinforcing to the student. For individual students, if you're working in a special education classroom or a general education classroom and you're working with a specific student, I had a student that I was trying to work on practicing phone numbers. He did not know his home phone number, his mom's phone number, his dad's phone number. And so we were really trying to work on those skills. So what I did was every time that he finished a subject, ELA, math, he would get to add a number to the phone number. And when the whole phone number was spelled out for them, they got to make the call. So I worked this out with mom and dad, and they would call at the end of the day. They always knew what time it would happen, or if they didn't earn it, what time it wouldn't happen. It was the same time every day. And if they earned all of their pieces, they actually got to call that person for a quick 2 minutes just to tell them how their day's going. And that was really reinforcing to the student. And by the end of the year, he actually learned his home phone number, his mom's phone number, and his dad's phone number. It was really, really cool. Another one that I had is one of my learners enjoyed my fingernails because I get my nails done about every 2 weeks. And so every time I'd come in with new fingernails, she would look at them, she would touch them, she wanted to talk about the colors that I picked, and she loved it. So I thought, how cool would it be if she earned a finger for every day that she had appropriate behavior? And at the end of the 14 days, if she had 2 hands, 10 fingernails, she got to choose the color of my nails. Let's say she had 11 fingers or 12 fingers. Those extra fingers, she could pick an extra color. And yes, I did come to school with my nails pink and purple and green with sparkles on them because she earned that. And that was something that was really reinforcing. So reinforcers can be something that is just helpful to the student, something that they really like. Thank you so much for coming to my session on making behaviors as easy as ABC. Here is my contact information. If you have any further questions or you just want to throw some feedback, whatever you would like to do, here is my contact information, Catherine_Miller at slipperyrock.k12.pa.us. And I will leave that up for a minute for you to write down or to take a picture of. All right, and then I promised for you that I would be showing you some of the references or the things that I have utilized in my classroom. So here is the first one I want to show you, the binder that I have my students carry. Now this is just a white piece of paper because it does have a student's name on the other side with just some reinforcing things that the student liked. For example, this one had dinosaurs on it. So here's their binder that has the visual schedule for the morning, just has Velcro, and then for the afternoon, and then the binder pouch that has all of the pieces in it, as well as the first then schedule. And here's the one I was talking about with the first, then, and next. And I got all of that from the Simply Special Ed on Teachers Pay Teachers. The other one is I Am Working For board, and these are just laminated with Velcro, and then you can put the pieces on it. This is from Teaching Autism from Teachers Pay Teachers, and the pictures are some of the pictures are still from the Simply Special Ed. The break cards, these are the ones that I utilize on the desks when I'm working with a student that have the different times. And I printed them out on different colors. You can print it out on whatever cardstock you have or paper you have. I laminate mine because I think it lasts longer. And these are from the Ed Queen on Teachers Pay Teachers. I have these break cards that I made based on the colors of the zones of regulation. You don't have to do that. That's just what I chose to do. These are from Teacher Turned Learner on Teachers Pay Teachers. The visual warning cards here, the green, I just throw it on a lanyard, the green, the yellow, the red, and then I also do have a break card on here, and that is from Teaching the Whole Child, as well as the behavior contingency map, which is also what I throw in the binder. And like I said, I just laminate it and use a dry erase marker to write on it. And that is all that I have for you today. Oh, I can show you this too. Here's my clay jam that I made. It's just puzzle pieces that you can throw on. It works really well too. If you have any further questions, please reach out to me. It was really great, and I hope that you got so much information from this and just something that's really reinforcing to you. All right, everyone, goodbye.